I do think that there are, I guess, ties in social media. Whilst I love that social media has given us the ability to connect, on a global scale, it has made life, so much better for so many reasons. But I also think that it has probably enhanced this, this ideal of what a body should be like. And not just like your physical body. I'm talking about like your, facial complexion, the materialistic things that, are fun to strive towards. But I think it allows for a lot more comparison. And self-comparison is so dangerous. And I think one of the first things that I have most of my clients do is any pages and any groups, organizations, whatever it is, businesses that you follow that, cause you to feel, less than you are, and make you feel, insuperior, then you need to stop following those types of accounts and jump on board the ones that are, promoting self-care, that are promoting you being worthy exactly as you are.
What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovcik. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health, and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do, getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health, and I have a very, very special guest today, somebody that I've followed for quite a while, and I think is one of the voices for absolute good in the nutrition industry, which is very, very sorely needed. I have Miss Holly Baxter here with me today. How are you doing?
I am doing really well. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Well, why don't you give yourself a little introduction so that way my audience knows who you are. I'm sure some of them do, but perhaps not all. So go ahead. The floor is yours.
Yeah. So I guess my credentials are in dietetics. So I went to school for food science and nutrition, and I have a master's degree in dietetics. But my background is super interesting, and I think I've kind of weaved all over the place, but it's landed me now. I guess we're sitting here in already May 2023. Wow. The year has gone so quickly.
It has.
But right now, as it stands, I would call myself an online nutrition science communicator. So the road that got me to that place, though, has been paved with lots of different types of sport. I was really active as a kid. I did track athletics, played basketball. But I guess kind of growing up in Australia, you don't really have a whole lot of opportunities, at least not as a female, to get into sport. So the next best thing was really, okay, well, how can I fuel sport better? And we'll go into the nutrition space. So I've done that and then found myself in bodybuilding or competing as a bikini fitness competitor. And that was really by chance. I knew nothing about the industry, back then. And it was just some of my clients that I was, doing their nutrition programming for had kind of, introduced me and said, hey, you'd probably be, really good at this. And I ended up competing at the World Championships in Dubai in 2015. That was my first big competition. And I have continued to compete as a competitor for, I guess, the last several years. So my most recent competition was 2022, and I was at World Championships again for the WBFF. But it has not necessarily been a smooth journey for me. And I think, maybe some of the value to the listeners that are kind of tuning in today will be some of the experiences I think that I've had, throughout that process, and just the self-learning, overcoming what I would say was a really severe eating disorder. I've had, a pretty traumatic upbringing, and, it's all kind of created the person that I was. And thankfully, I've kind of been able to come out the other side. So I've got a good mixture of, I guess, experience.
Yeah. One thing that I've been kind of learning a lot about lately is specifically eating disorders. And as a person who was formerly carnivore for about 2 years, it's really hard to recognize disordered eating until you're kind of out of that space and then realize what that actually looks like. And for me, that was, I would eat 1,800 calories of just straight up ground beef and steak throughout the week. And then my wife and I, girlfriend at the time, would go out to dinner or something like that. And then I ended up face first in all the ice cream and cheesecake and everything like that. And I would just feel like the worst human being alive because I knew, hey, I can't have these carbohydrates because they're making me fat and this is so bad for me. And, over the course of 2 years, I just remember doing that over and over and over again. And I feel like a lot of people who get into the nutrition space or learn about this stuff see the hot take of, oh, carbs make you fat, fat makes you fat. They see these hot takes on TikTok or whatever, and then they cling to that diet group, and then that really sends them down a bad path. And one thing that I've really admired about you in particular is that you've been kind of open about that, and you've also kind of pushed against that and tried to tell people like you need to have a better relationship with yourself and with your diet, and how you kind of look at this holistically rather than just looking at nutrition in one light. So obviously, like I said earlier, I've really tried to tell people you shouldn't put morality to food. And I think a lot of your message kind of encircles that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, there's so much to unpack there. I think, it makes sense from like a human, like evolutionary standpoint as to, why we find ourselves like being attached to, a particular style of diet. I think ultimately, if we're to look at our core values and the things that really give us a sense of purpose, for the most part, and I would assume for most people, it's having, strong connections, having, deep relationships and like the sense of belonging. So it's really easy to see why, if you cling to this group, whether it's the carnivore diet or the intermittent fasting diet or, flexible dieting diet, there's a group of people, there's this tribe mentality, and, you get this sense of, support. So I do understand. And I think, it's kind of, I think having that compassion and that empathy for just recognizing why people kind of do this, it makes it easier to kind of break down what's really going on. But you're exactly right. There are so many different kinds of diets. And I think, over the years, I've personally tried nearly every kind of diet. And some of them have, worked well, others have not, been sustainable. And what we do know now from a scientific standpoint is that there are so many different dietary approaches that can work and can be really successful. So I think, there's so much value in experimenting and exploring, what of these diets work best for your lifestyle. But, the piece that's usually missing for a lot of individuals that don't have that nutrition science background is the why. Why is that diet successful? And ultimately, every diet can be successful, provided that is putting you into a calorie deficit, and providing that you're, eating an adequate amount of, protein. Then how you distribute your remaining carbohydrates and fats is really up to you. Now, there might be some small nuances that might give you a little bit of an advantage. So, a quick example of that might be, intermittent fasting might not be the best approach to your nutrition if your goal is to maximize muscle gain. So, maybe you're training at 6 o'clock in the morning and then you go to work, and maybe you don't eat your first meal until sometime in the afternoon, and perhaps you're only having 2 large meals. So would I say that's the best type of diet for building muscle? No. You'd be best to go based on the research, which says, maybe 3 to 5 meals spread equally throughout the day. Every meal has some protein. Right. So you can kind of turn on, some of those regulatory pathways that signal your muscle to grow. But if that doesn't work for your lifestyle, if you've got a really crazy job where you're on your feet, you have to be go, 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 and you can only do, 2 meals a day, well, then that's the best that you're going to get unless you want to change your career. And I think, another example is some of the research that's come out on, timing of meals or timing of calories. So there was one particular paper that I can think of that looked at the differences in total daily energy expenditure between two different groups. One group would eat most of their calories in the morning, and then the other group would eat most of their calories in the evening. And there was actually a slight benefit to the group that consumed a greater percentage of their daily calories in the morning. So basically what that means is that your body is able to, I guess, break down and metabolize that energy and expend more calories doing so in the mornings. So, that would lead some people to go, well, perhaps I shouldn't be eating, late at night if it means that I'm going to be, burning less calories to do that. But if your personal preferences do not suit that style of eating, and you end up overeating at the end of the day because you're so hungry after eating more in the morning, like that's not a good trade-off. Right. So, sometimes you've got to find the compromise, because science can say one thing, but it doesn't make it practical for everybody. So yeah, I think that's the really good news is there's so many different dietary approaches that can work.
Yeah, the one thing that's kind of been frustrating is to see keto being so, I don't even want to say necessarily artificially boosted, but it's really been kind of put to the forefront. And I feel like this really hurts because carbohydrates are very, very satiating and very, very good foods, specifically for people who are looking to build as much muscle as possible. And you're missing out on a lot of like just enjoyable foods when you cut out carbohydrates. And now you see everything's being labeled like cooked in this certain oil because, seed oils are so bad for you, right? And, it has stevia and monk fruit instead of sucralose or Ace K. But people are missing out on a lot of very, very satiating foods that could help them, not only stay on their diet, but, also enjoy their diet a lot more. Because, what do you hear from a lot of people that do keto? Well, I do great when I'm on keto. And my question after that is always, well, why can't you stay on keto then? That should be the question that you're always asking, because, does it really matter if you can lose the weight if you can't keep it off? I mean, that's kind of the goal at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. I actually did a ketogenic diet for about 6 months, several years ago, for some health reasons. And I've got to say, it was fun for me in the sense that back then I had time to cook. I don't anymore, but it gave me, an opportunity to experiment with some new foods, and I got to put some of those in some of my recipe books. So there was a positive, like, I guess, business outcome from that, but I couldn't have stuck to that long term because I do really enjoy carbohydrates, and I don't want to have to, bend over backwards to kind of recreate, my favorite dessert with, high fat products. So I personally just prefer to have a balanced diet where, after my protein has been accounted for, the remaining calories are, pretty even between fats and carbs. Now, there are going to be certain days where I might choose to eat, a higher fat, menu. For instance, I might make a dish that's got lots of full fat cream in it. Or one day for lunch, rather than having a regular meal, I might be out with girlfriends and I'm going to have a cheese platter. So it's basically all fat and, very low carbohydrate. So I just kind of balance out my calories depending what I'm in the mood for. And you can do that. But I think the interesting thing is that, people who have tried or experimented with different types of diets, when they go to the ketogenic diet, they do potentially have some pretty rapid success, at least in the initial few weeks, because once you remove those carbohydrates from somebody's diet, the amount of weight loss just from water alone is really substantial. Right. So you've got to think about it like let's say you've got a full balloon of water. So imagine that balloon is representing your muscle and the glycogen that's stored inside your muscle tissue. So, you take away a major food group like carbohydrates. Well, now that balloon shrinks all the way down. And for every 1 gram of carbohydrate that we lose or we consume, there are 2.7 mils of water either stored inside the muscle tissue or lost if you are in a calorie deficit. So, there's big fluctuations in body weight when we kind of go through these transitions. And I think without that knowledge, a lot of people will go, well, why did keto work so well for me so quickly? When I try and diet with carbohydrates, things don't really, work so well. But we're not actually looking at fat loss. What we're seeing there is actually a change in someone's total body water. So I think, there's so many things that influence your body weight that people don't know about. Changes in your dietary fiber are really significant in the way of how it affects your weight on the scale. If you eat 5 or 7 grams more fiber one day compared to the previous, you will absolutely weigh more on the scale that next day. The same goes for someone that's got a menstrual cycle. 1 to 2% of a change in total body weight is pretty normal for most women. And most women don't know that. So when they see their weight kind of moving around, they're really, really afraid. And it might actually have nothing to do with body fat gain. Progesterone and estrogen are the main culprits there. And for women, halfway through their menstrual cycle, so around the time of ovulation, progesterone peaks. And that progesterone is one of the main causes or drivers of increased appetite. So you naturally get a little bit more hungry and you retain more water. So for a woman, every 2 weeks, you're probably going to see some weird stuff going on the scale, and that has nothing to do with body fat. So I think it's really important to kind of get educated about all of the influences. So I know I've digressed a little bit. You probably have to redirect me back to what we were chatting about.
No, that's okay. One thing that you kind of brought up towards something earlier was the eating at night versus eating in the morning. I remember when I was doing carnivore, initially I had started fasting and I skipped my breakfast. And what I found is that I was beginning to get really, really hungry in the morning. And now I've kind of switched over to more of a flexible approach to dieting. And I typically do eat a pretty large breakfast, and I find that does well for me. Could it possibly be when people eat at night that maybe they're still digesting food in the morning, so that could have altered the results of kind of that experiment? That's been something that I've kind of kicked around in my mind, because I think some people think, oh, well, I should just eat at night, but then, that may potentially interrupt the way that you're sleeping, because if you have like a big bolus of protein and fat, then you may still be digesting some food while you're sleeping, which may raise your body temperature and make it a little bit hard for you to get into more restful stages of sleep. I am stoked to tell you guys about the show's new sponsor. I am now working with MTS Nutrition, which is a brand that I've believed in for a very, very long time, and they run awesome cells and they have awesome products. So I want to tell you about their amazing protein powder, which you're going to ask me how many pounds I have of the protein powder, and the answer is all of them. So here I got red velvet cake, 25 grams of protein, and they have the amino acids and everything on there, 59 servings. Peanut butter fluff, fluffernutter, 26 grams of protein, and then also the chocolate chip cookie, which literally has real pieces of chocolate chip cookie in there. So 27 grams of protein, 180. As I've talked about on the show, getting your protein in is very, very important. So make sure you hit that link below and purchase your protein powder through MTS Nutrition. Boom!
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to say straight up, I don't know. That's definitely not my area of expertise, but I can certainly talk about it with the information that I do know. So I know that having a high calorie meal right before bed, particularly protein, it can have that effect. So I think if we're looking at your, fat loss outcomes, for instance, if that is then going to start interfering with your ability to get a quality night's sleep, and we know small sleep disruptions, even as little as say 30 minutes to your normal circadian rhythm, that actually influences your appetite regulating hormones the following day. So
I didn't realize it was that little.
Yeah, you'll see a drop in somebody's leptin levels, and you'll see an increase in their ghrelin. So even though nothing changed about the total amount of calories you might have consumed that previous day, because you ate more in the evening, and then maybe that did have an impact on your ability to sleep well, it actually is going to set you up for failure potentially the next day, just because of the appetite regulation and those hormonal fluctuations. So I think it's probably important to consider those things. What I say to my clients is don't eat right before you're climbing into bed.
Yeah.
It does do that, and I'm a hot sleeper. I have my like fan set at like 60 degrees, and
Yeah.
I've got a fan on my face.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would always leave a little bit of time before I go to bed to allow for that kind of digestion,
Mhm.
and then for your body to naturally shift into that rest and digest state. So
Yeah, I know my wife's very, very similar as well. It's usually pretty much as soon as we go into the bedroom together, she's like, "Oh, I'm just so hot." So turn down the AC a little bit. So another thing that we were kind of talking about a little bit earlier is eating disorders. And um, like I said, it's kind of frustrating because when you try to share information about an important topic and you're not giving your hot take, it doesn't get anywhere near as many eyes as you think it should. But if you just say something real quick that gets everybody eyes, then they care about that. But though when you tell people like, hey, eating disorders have the highest mortality out of any disorder that there is, like that is huge. And when you have people telling other people that like, hey, this food's going to kill you, this food's going to kill you, like you could see why people get so freaked out about eating certain things and how that could complement itself to disordered eating and then eating disorders. And as you kind of talked about a little bit earlier, you struggled with that a little bit. So perhaps you could enlighten the audience on kind of what that's like and to kind of come through the other side successful.
Yeah, so I guess when I was really young, I had some horrible experiences, and I think the one that I'm open and happy to share with you guys is one of my very first training coaches. So I was, I guess, competing at a pretty high level for athletics, and my coach at the time was also the coach of the former Olympian 400-meter track medalist. She was an Australian, actually. And I guess there was a couple of moments where during our training sessions, he would make comments about my body composition. And looking back now, I was like a very healthy body weight. I would be still on the lower side of normal. And I remember him saying, Holly, you need to lose some body fat. It's slowing you down. We need to get you more muscular. And I think at the time I was, about 16 or 17. I had a lot of other, strained relationships at the time with my parents, some other things kind of going on. And I had zero confidence anyway. I felt completely out of control. So I think my response to the stress that I was going through and, those kind of negative comments about my body, it was like the one thing, my body was the one thing that I could control. So, from there, I kind of took that really seriously. And my, I guess, relationship with food absolutely plummeted. I was anorexic for about 6 or 7 months, and then it kind of became binge eating disorder and bulimia. So, if anyone that's listening doesn't know what bulimia is, that is purging after you eat. And that went on for 15 years for me. And this was happening while I was doing my undergraduate. It was happening while I was doing my master's degree. And I think because I was in this space where, you should have your stuff together. Like you're the expert in nutrition. Why? And then, so I felt so much shame and so much guilt because I thought I should know how to manage this. It's like, I know what I should be eating. So why can't I do it? And I completely ignored the fact that this is a psychological condition. I had experienced trauma, and I just wasn't joining the dots. And at the time, I didn't really have any positive influences to kind of help redirect me or push to, go and get expert help with a therapist. And also I was a struggling student. Of course, it's expensive to go and have therapy. So it kind of got to the point where it took over my life. I was probably purging 3 times a week. I was doing crazy amounts of exercise, to try and control, how my body looked. And my whole identity was wrapped up in my physical appearance. It was like I couldn't control anything else. And I felt like I had such little value. Everything that I did was based on, or the only time I ever felt I had, love or acceptance from at least my family and peers was when I did something well. It was whether it was academic, my grades at school, sporting performance, how well I performed when I was, singing and playing in bands. Like that was the only time I ever felt a sense of, accomplishment and love. So, I've often referred to this as it was never unconditional love that I received. It was very conditional. So I kind of went through my adult life, kind of everything was a performance. Everything was done, for the feelings of acceptance. And I really, my body and how it looked was the one thing that I felt like got the most, acceptance. So, I was a young PT at the time, and I really felt like, I had to be stage lean to be taken seriously. And I think also being female in a fairly male predominant industry back then, it was almost like I had to do twice as much work to be, listened to. So it actually set me up for, I guess, a not so positive route. So I went into bodybuilding for all the wrong reasons. It was almost like an excuse to, continue this eating disorder. It was an excuse to, be crazy about my exercise. It was an excuse to restrict. It was an excuse to, to not eat and maintain this lean physique. So I think after like 5 or 6 years of competing, so I did all of my competitions with that eating disorder driving the ship. It was not so much about enjoying the process, it was the outcome that I cared about most. And I think as I kind of got to a very low point in my life, to the point of like suicidal thoughts, suicidal ideation. So I kind of had this epiphany. It was like, when is this going to stop ruling my life? Like food really is ruling and taking over my life. So I think through the support of some really awesome mentors and then getting professional help. And it was every week for about 4 years, I'd say now. And I still have a therapist, that same therapist. And it's, completely different things that we talk about, but that consistent amount of work to recognize, where this eating disorder came from. And honestly, it was a symptom of my, childhood trauma. That was, the eating disorder manifested because of all of these things that had happened, when I was young. So it's so wonderful to be on the other side of all that. But I can tell you now, it was so much work. I'd say it felt like taking 10 steps backwards. The emotional roller coaster that you ride as you're kind of going through your stages of healing. But I'm so grateful that I did, and I am a huge advocate now for women and mental health groups, women and mental health in general, and really pushing for anybody to recognize that you are more than a body. You are more than your physical appearance. And it took a long time for me, and I know it's taken a long time for many of the clients that I work with, to really accept that and to believe that. So yeah, I don't know whether that answers your question.
No, it does. Yeah, and that's incredible that you kind of made it through that, because I couldn't imagine struggling with something, especially for that long. And the hardest part about that is that you can't stop eating, right? I mean, you have to continue. So it's a very, very delicate balance to walk. So how many clients do you see that have eating disorders or disordered eating in your experience? Does it seem like a lot of people? And do you think it's, what do you think that's kind of coming from?
Yeah, so I'd say probably 50% of the clients that I work with now are coming to me with either a history of an eating disorder, or they're still experiencing symptoms of disordered eating. So there is a little bit of a difference between those two. And I'd say that it has progressively gotten worse over the years. I do think that there are, I guess, ties in social media. Whilst I love that social media has given us the ability to connect, on a global scale, it has made life, so much better for so many reasons. But I also think that it has probably enhanced this, this ideal of what a body should be like. And not just like your physical body. I'm talking about like your, facial complexion, the materialistic things that, are fun to strive towards. But I think it allows for a lot more comparison. And self-comparison is so dangerous. And I think one of the first things that I have most of my clients do is any pages and any groups, organizations, whatever it is, businesses that you follow that, cause you to feel, less than you are, and make you feel, insuperior, then you need to stop following those types of accounts and jump on board the ones that are, promoting self-care, that are promoting you being worthy exactly as you are. And I think it's important to differentiate, having a fitness goal or a health and fitness goal, but then making it your identity. Some people will say, well, isn't that hypocritical? Holly, you're still a nutrition coach, you are a dietitian, and you're still competing. Like, that's like the pinnacle of, your body image. Like, you're literally being judged by, somebody on your appearance. And I've thought a lot about this. And what's been so wonderful for me to experience is that I'm not attached to the outcome anymore. I know I'm good whether I am, 30 pounds above stage weight or I'm stage weight, and I'm good anywhere in between. So I've stayed in the sport, and I will continue to be in the sport to advocate for, that self-efficacy, for, women that, think that this is the only way for them to feel good about themselves, to feel that they're enough. And it's not the only way. And for many people, they completely neglect the psychological influence and the ability for you to achieve absolute like contentment and happiness without changing a dang thing about your body. And I think psychological change is one of the hardest things. I don't know about you, but for me, if someone said, I want you to go and run 5 miles, and then I want you to do 100 push-ups, I don't know, some kind of crazy workout. Or if someone said, the other choice is, you can do this psychological, mindset work. It's going to take you twice as long, and it's going to be just as difficult, but in different ways. Which one will you choose? And I think I would always previously choose the physical route, because I can push myself as hard as I remember throwing up after training sessions like multiple times because I go so hard. But the psychological change, that takes a lot of commitment, and it's it's unknown for a lot of people. Like, we don't have the skills to, what's the word I'm looking for? To critique ourselves and to get through whatever it is that we need to get through. So I really hope that, with the work that me and my team are doing, we can kind of bridge the gap between, nutrition and exercise science, because there is a science to it. But you can have all the knowledge in the world. I can tell you exactly how to diet, whichever way you want to try. But the big sticking point is, are you able to change the behaviors? And that starts often with, what are you telling yourself? What is that internal dialogue? Because what you believe is a direct reflection of how you act or how you respond. And then that's usually a direct reflection of your habits. So much of the work that needs to be done is on the mindset. And there is a big gap between those two things right now in our industries. So we're hoping to kind of bring that all together.
Well, I really, really appreciate that. And I think you do a very, very good job, because I think you're a very personable and friendly person. Whenever I know when you do Q&As, I think you give very, very insightful and positive answers. So I think that's really, really good. And I like that you brought up kind of like the psychological deal of it, because like, I think we all know that everybody has a problem with looking at their phone when they know they shouldn't be. And like, that you shouldn't be, but how hard is it to just put it down? Like, it's actually a lot more difficult than we make it out to be. And, the same thing goes for diet, is that like, you shouldn't, there's certain behaviors that may not get you towards your goal. And that's very, very difficult to change. Like, that's not just something that you can just wake up and say, I did it. Like this past weekend, Well, for the last 2 weeks, I'm on a little bit of a diet break. So I'm back at maintenance calories for the last 2 weeks, and I set new records. I deadlifted 500 pounds for 3 reps for the first time, and then 530 pounds for the first time. And I'm like, this is awesome. But like,
Correct.
I may go out with my wife or something like that, and like I'll be scrolling through Twitter. I'm like, this isn't time for that. Like, I should be enjoying myself with my wife. I shouldn't be doing that. So that's just kind of speaking to your point that mindset really is almost everything.
It is, and you've got to be so intentional with it. But I think what comes before that is your ability to be self-aware.
Mhm.
And today's, everybody's so busy, because we're, globally connected now. I
Right.
feel like for me, the work that I did 15 years ago, it was difficult, but I feel like the pressure to, meet the demands now is even greater because I've got like 15 emails, and then I've got to respond to the, 3 different YouTube channels and 4 different Instagram pages. And then it's just wild. So we're all so busy. And I think it's really hard to be mindful and to have that level of self-awareness when you're just so rushed all the time.
Right.
So I think part of the, I guess, ability to overcome whatever the things are that you're struggling with, some kind of, bad habit, starts with slowing down. So, take the time to check in with yourself. Okay, what really are the things that are limiting me? What are my obstacles? What is getting in the way of me, not hitting macro targets if you're somebody that flexible diets? And I think the biggest thing that I have found to be beneficial for me was time blocking. I promise I'll bring this back to the original point.
No, good.
So, when I'm working with clients, and even this is what I've done for myself, I kind of had to look at, okay, well, why aren't I able to successfully execute this goal? Whether it was something in business, getting something done on time, or whether it was something to do with my, competitions and, failing to hit macros. And I started time blocking 15-minute windows. So every 15 minutes, and I did it for 2 weeks straight, I would just write in my calendar, just my Google Calendar, what I was doing. So it might have been like scrolling Instagram, and then it might have been responding to DMs on Instagram, or it might have been, I don't know, doing something on my phone, reading random emails that weren't important. So I think you kind of get where I'm going with this. So the whole day, I'd map it out by 15-minute intervals. And then, I kind of looked at, well, if these are my goals over here, if this business goal is as important as I say it is, and if my, bodybuilding competition is coming right around the corner, you need to be at a certain leanness to be successful. Where are you wasting time? So I kind of went through and I was like, wow, there's at least 5 or something hours, every week where I'm just fart-assing around. So I started to get really specific with, time blocking what I wanted to be doing. Right down to when am I meal prepping on the week? Because, you make plans on the weekends, you've got to follow up on some emails, or you've got to do some, administrative type work. And then all of a sudden, there's no time left. You're tired, you're exhausted, it's dinner time on Sunday, and the new week's about to start. Yeah. So, I would start to plan like so many of those things. And then all of a sudden, I started actually being able to execute on my goals. So I do think that you have to be really intentional. If you've got a habit that is not serving you well, and it's sometimes you have to have those I guess reality checks, because, and I've had this with clients, they'll tell me this is really important to me and this thing's really important to me, and I'll have to say, you've got so many things that you do. How on earth do you think that you're going to lose this amount of weight when you've only got 3 hours spare to do exercise in a week, based on what you're telling me? Right. So it's not that that's a dumb goal. It's that we just have to rethink our timelines.
All right, guys. I'm absolutely thrilled with the show's new sponsor. I am now sponsored and have an affiliate through LMNT electrolytes. I've used these electrolytes for years. Back when I used to do a lot of fasting, in fact, I used to drink, sometimes I want to say up to 7 a day, 7 little packets. So the packets are full of all the electrolytes that you need to perform and hydrate yourself properly. you need sodium for pretty much every single function in your body, despite what a lot of people may tell you. Sodium doesn't actually cause a lot of the issues that people kind of would have you believe. So just real quick to give you a little bit of facts, you don't need sugar to hydrate. Electrolytes in water don't require glucose to pass through the gut. The average American consumes over 60 pounds of sugar a year. And when it comes to athletic performance, you can actually lose up to 7 grams per day in hot climate. So make sure you click on the affiliate link below to get all your hydration needs. And like I said, I'm super stoked to have these guys teamed up with the podcast, and just make sure you get your electrolytes through LMNT. All right, guys, thanks.
And you have to rethink your expectations. And if you don't like it, well, then something's got to change. So, I think part of what I do, I feel like with coaching, is just helping people identify, what are their obstacles, what are the things that are really impeding them, and then finding solutions. And it's amazing what happens when you start to kind of retrain somebody, the way that they're thinking about themselves, the way that they, go about their day, their planning. And then you start to really get awesome results because you're solving all the issues.
Wow. Yeah, that's huge. One thing that was difficult for me to kind of understand was initially when I was learning about nutrition stuff, like you said, we're very, very fast paced, is like, how do you separate good information from bad? And like somebody that's just kind of going into the nutrition world, they hear, as I was kind of saying earlier, like hot takes, and they think that that's good. But then someone like you, or maybe Brad Schoenfeld, or somebody that's knowledgeable and willing to talk about the nuances of stuff, you guys don't have the hot take, right? You guys are willing to say, well, there's a little bit more here than that we need to kind of dive in on. What do you think is like the best way for people to kind of get information that's not going to be, BS, right? So like I said, when people are scrolling through TikTok, this is real nice and easy to just get real quick tidbits. Whereas, like I said, someone like you may not be able to, and it's not a dunk, but it's like, you're going to want to give people the full picture. How do we kind of keep the curve as low as possible so that way people can kind of step up to achieve better health? This has been something that I've battled with a lot.
It's really hard. And again, this is why I say I love social media, because it's given people that are extremely knowledgeable and maybe inaccessible because they live in other countries a platform to share their message. But how do you differentiate someone, that is extremely, knowledgeable, and they have a PhD with, just somebody that's lean naturally, they've got a busy job and they've done one competition and, they look great. So, they must know what they're doing. So I think credibility is everything. And it's so interesting. I remember the first time I ever hired somebody to work for me. This is like probably, I don't know, over 10 years ago now. And I said to her, what was the main thing that, drew you to my work and to what I'm doing? And she's like, I'll be honest, it was just what you looked like. And I was just like, wow, okay, well, I'm flattered, but I'm like, oh, so you didn't know, what I did for a profession? You didn't know that I had a, BS in food science and nutrition, or I had a master's degree, or, I follow the evidence. And she's like, no, you just looked really good. And I'm like, are you serious? So I think, people need to weigh more to, what is somebody's academic background? So, you can do that pretty quickly by looking at the letters after their name, what's their BS in, what's their master's degree in, and, if they've done a PhD, what was it in? And I think it gets tricky there too, because some people will potentially use that, those letters in front of their name, and then they kind of go a little bit off topic and they start talking about things they shouldn't be talking about. So a great example there's plenty of medical doctors out there that, they're very intelligent,
right?
But, then they start to step into the nutrition lane or the exercise science lane, and you've got people that have actually done PhDs in that very specific, niche. That's all they do. They live, they breathe, they are like a living muscle. They know everything about it, right? And, they don't have that level of experience. Like an MD just cannot have the same knowledge as a PhD. So I think making sure that the content that the person is delivering matches their credentials. And then I would probably say anybody that's really dogmatic about one particular thing and their answers or their responses are very one directional. You have to do this. You must follow this type of diet. This one is the best. If you hear that kind of language, I would say run. There's always context is so important. So I'm probably when it comes to putting content out, I suck because I don't want somebody to misinterpret what I'm saying and apply my, discussion on intermittent fasting with their recent type 2 diabetes diagnosis when I'm talking about it from the standpoint of, building strength and muscle. So, I really try to make sure that I provide the context first and then, compared to what is usually how you've got to finish those sentences. So, is the ketogenic diet the best diet for building muscle? But we could say, well, you can build muscle on a ketogenic diet, yes, but compared to what? Well, compared to a diet that is inclusive of carbohydrate, ketogenic diet is actually inferior when it comes to building muscle. So I think that's really important. Someone that provides context, somebody that does not always, they're not dogmatic, they're very cautious. They may say it depends, or they might say, I don't know. They're the kinds of things that are going to point towards somebody that's evidence-based. Whereas I think individuals that don't have that educational background, they tend to really jump on that Bandcamp and they don't know all the answers. So they seem to have this super level of confidence, which I don't know where it comes from, but even I still have a hard time talking, about certain things because I don't want to say the wrong thing. It's like I don't know what the
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yes, the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's like you first learn about something and your confidence is up here, and then the more you learn about it, you're like, oh wow, we really don't know a whole lot about this at all.
Yeah, that's exactly how it goes too. And it's so frustrating because social media really does kind of incentivize that hot take and to put out a video and say, this is the one thing. I mean, you see it all the time. And then, they'll get into the video, oh, well, you should avoid all seed oils. You should avoid all artificial sweeteners. You should avoid all this. You should avoid all that. And, kind of throughout the whole conversation, we've really laid it out that this is kind of what leads to disordered eating, is that people get scared to put anything in their mouth. And I think it's just such an unhealthy way to live. And I don't think everybody that's kind of putting out that kind of content has nefarious intent, but I really don't think they consider the full context and just how bad that can be for some people.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why I am not on TikTok. I don't know that, the subjects and the topics that I enjoy talking about, they do require a pretty nuanced discussion, and it might be better suited to the podcasting platforms, and that's why I do 50-minute long YouTube videos, because it warrants further discussion, and I really had to stick to my guns with that. I could easily, as a female in fitness, do what every single female in fitness does. I'm probably overgeneralizing here, but the stereotype might be lots of selfies, just training. They're not necessarily adding value. They might look cool. They've got cool sports clothes on. I don't know. They look pretty. But, I'm really trying to stick to evidence-based information. And the consequence, and it's sad, is that my following does not grow at the speed of, somebody that's constantly just putting out selfies. And I don't want to give in to that, because I know how hard, how the consequences of what putting up that bad information can do to people. So I think we've got to educate about the negatives and the consequences of, sharing, information that you might not know is entirely correct. I think people need to be really mindful of, how they refer to their bodies, I think people need to be really mindful of how they refer to other people's bodies and what message are they portraying, by sharing the content that they're sharing. How might that influence somebody else? So yeah, I've really pulled back on the amount of like photo shoot photos that I put up on my social media page, because I don't want people or anybody to ever feel, less than about themselves because they see a picture of me with a bikini on. So now most of my stuff's just me in my homeless gym wear, just sitting around, or it's just a profile picture, because I don't want to have to use my body for you to believe what I'm telling you here as truth. And yeah, it makes me really mad sometimes, but I also know that I go to bed and I sleep easy because I'm doing what's right. But yeah, I think it'll cotton on. It'll cotton on.
Yeah. No, well, I think you're doing the right thing. So I want to be respectful of your time. There's one more subject I wanted to hit on that you kind of noticed before we started rolling. Your life with music. Okay, so you said you sing, you play piano, and then you told me you also play guitar. So what's kind of like your experience with that? Because I was watching one of your workout videos actually on my drive home, and there was some heavier music in there, which I play for a band called A Common Crowd, and we do have a female singer, and we're like alternative metal, not insanely heavy, but there's some heavier stuff in there. And in that workout video, there was some heavier stuff. So I'm just kind of curious about like your interest in music.
So I started singing when I was 3. So I did song and dance from 3 to like 15 years of age. And then when I got to high school, I was in an all-girl band. So I'm not even gonna, no, you know what, I should. My band was called Lavalia. I was a singer, and we did like Hilary Duff, we did Avril Lavigne, we did like all of the punk rock girls. And then when I got to college, I was in an all boy band, and it was all alternate rock, like pretty, a bit of emo, a bit of pop punk, but mostly alternative metal. And I loved it. So we had like a demo CD. We used to play, at local bars. And then I've been on The Voice when I was really young. Did Australian Idol. So yeah, I have had a lot of experience singing and playing the guitar. Yeah, I just bought myself a new piano because it's been too long, but I've just got to carve out some time to do it.
Yeah, the one thing mindset wise that always kind of helped me was saying that instead of saying I don't have time for that, say it's not a priority. And I found that kind of really helps me organize what things are important, because like if I say I'm not practicing guitar because I don't have time, versus saying I'm not playing guitar because it's not a priority, I'm like, well, that's kind of fucked up, because it's like this is my life. I love doing this. Like actually this weekend that we're recording this right now, so it'll be May 7th, my band's opening for Lita Ford, which is for the second time. So I'm super excited.
Singer. I'm gonna have to look you guys up. And if you have cool music, I'm totally gonna ask if I could put it over my over my videos.
Oh, absolutely, you could. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah. The intro to the podcast is one of our songs, but she's not singing it. I'm speaking over it. But so you do you go to like any live music? Because I know you're down in St. Pete, right?
I actually just bought a house in Fort Lauderdale. So I was originally in Tampa, Florida, and so 4.5-hour drive to the East Coast. I'm in Fort Lauderdale now. So, but I've been to a lot of different bars around the places and have seen there's really good music at the most random like spots here. So I know that there's a spot in St. Pete where I got to see Seven Dust.
My God, really?
Yeah, that's like one of my favorites.
Yeah, their singer actually follows my singer on Instagram. I love Seven Dust. They're one of my favorites.
Yeah, he follows me, and his wife, I actually worked with Ashley before too. Yeah, so yeah, I love heavy music. It's the only type of music that I can train to. I think you see people like, I don't know, dancing around the gym. I'm ready to like kill somebody. Yeah, I cannot lift heavy without some kind of alternate rock. So
okay. So what was your first so what was your first concert then?
First concert would have been oh goodness, in Australia. It was what did they call it? It was all metal. So
not Soundwave. It is Soundwave? Okay, yeah.
Soundwave was definitely my first concert.
Wow.
Who have I seen in concert? I've seen Seven Dust, All That Remains, who else? As I Lay Dying, Breaking Benjamin, Taproot. Just there's so many good ones, but they're so old. I think I stopped listening to music after like 2010. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah. If someone would have told me Holly Baxter listens to All That Remains and does her deadlifts at the gym, I would have said there's no effing way, or that you like Seven Dust, because that's I like grew up listening to that, and I've seen them I think 3 or 4 times, and they're just incredible.
All my PRs have been hit to the song Face to Face by Seven Dust.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so that's definitely what I'm listening to. I really love that. It's good energy.
Yeah. Do you ever see yourself kind of getting back out there to play music, or no?
Look, I never say never. I think if I can get my business set up to where I can afford myself some free time, because right now my priorities are reestablish my business and get it to the point where I can step away. I don't want to have to be doing this forever.
Right.
And I absolutely would. The next thing that I would do would be, going back into music, 100%. I've thought about just going and doing, a couple of, open mic nights. I've got friends that do play, except we're all too busy doing other stuff. So I think when we retire, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of jealous because I'm in southwestern Pennsylvania, but my wife and I did get married down in Florida, over in Sarasota. The name of the beach.
Yep.
Yeah, yes, the name of the beach escapes me, but I feel like all the bars down there, and just obviously the weather, I feel like you could just go anywhere and there's like a good music scene. And I've had friends that told me like, hey, they go down there and they make a ton of money playing music, and like my band up here, we don't make a lot of money really, but I mean, we've got to do cool gigs. Like I said, we've opened up for Lita Ford before. Back in 2020, I'll never forget, we opened for Steel Panther at the Butler Field, over 1,000 people. That was just an experience that I'll never forget in my life. So I'm sure you've experienced feeling the bass and stuff in your chest.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's completely different when you're on stage and your drummer hits the snare and you feel it. It's so cool.
I think it would be a fun element to add to my social media, because everything that I do is so serious that I think it would be fun to have an element of music, because everyone first off would be so shocked that I sing and play guitar. So there's that element, but also because it's just so that's one of the things that really soothes my soul. You can get lost for hours, because you're just so into it. So
Yeah. Do you ever find yourself sometimes, if you're driving to work or something like that? I listen to a lot of podcasts, but those sometimes I'm just like, I just need to just turn on tunes and just drift away and listen.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I guess they say music is good for your mind. So, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Holly, this has been a absolutely fantastic conversation. I can't wait to share this with everybody. And like I said, if you would have told me that Seven Dust was in your kind of top bands there, I would have said no effing way. So yeah, that's really, really cool. Holly, where can everybody find you, what you're doing, and keep up with you?
Absolutely. So my Instagram handle is Holly T Baxter, and my YouTube handle, I've kept it real easy. It's exactly the same. But all of my products and services. So I have a nutrition coaching app. I have a training app. I have a coaching team. We've got nutrition, exercise scientists. We've got physical therapists, chiropractors. I still coach, but all of that information, our books and everything, are all linked in my bios. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time. I'm glad we could do this. And like I said, this has probably been one of the better podcasts I think I've ever done. Just kind of spanned across all topics and really kind of hammered home the eating disorder stuff, which I think doesn't get enough air. So yeah, if you don't got anything else, we'll close her out.
That's all good.
Awesome. Thank you, Holly.